Because I'm going to be using it in many of the following examples, I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about iTween itself. iTween is a Unity plugin, and it's been available for a while. Some of you may have already used it. If you haven't, that's okay, because Playmaker integrates iTween and makes it really easy to use. I'm going to show you some iTween basics, but it's worth exploring the iTween website if you want to learn more about what it is and the good people who created it. In Playmaker, iTween has its own actions list. You can see it right here in the actions palette. And there's over 20 actions here to choose from that are iTween specific. Now you'll notice they primarily involved translations. There's a lot about move, there's a lot that deal with rotate, and there's a lot that deal with scaling. You might ask, well, if they're primarily about translations, what is it that makes iTween so special? Essentially, iTween takes complex motions and makes them really easy to achieve. Let me show you some examples. I've got this cube. What I'd like to do is animate it slowly towards this cylinder. Now, there's a few ways I could go about doing this. The first possibility is I could take this cube and, make it, or, imagine this cube as whatever object you want it to be. And I could animate it in a 3D program like, say, Maya, Max, Cheetah, any of those. But there's some problems with that. First of all, you'd need to actually own one of those programs, and some of them are really expensive. You'd have to know how to use that program and do animation within it, and you may or may not be a good animator. Also, the animation is baked in, and it can't dynamically change over time. That means if this was an object that was moving, and I wanted to have the cube track it as it moved, and be able to move around and follow it wherever it went, I wouldn't be able to do that if the animation was just baked in from here to here. All it could ever do is that one animation. There's another possibility here. We could do a set position. This FSM is attached to my cube. Let's look at that. If you look under position, we get a set position. And if we use it, we can set the owner as the game object that it's attached to, which it is. For the XYZ value, what we want to do is we're moving in the X. You can see right here, if you look up, I've got my object moving in that position. It's currently at -3. So we can just choose X right here and set it to be the same value as the cube. So basically, let's say we wanted to move it right here. We could just make that positive 2.7. Let's enter 2.7. And that should be a good. Let's go ahead and hit play and see what happens. When you start, the cube just jumps there. That's not what we wanted. We wanted it to animate, right? We wanted it to move slowly over time. And this, technically it's an animation, but it's not cool at all. It doesn't look good. So another possibility we could use maybe is a different sort of move here instead of setting its position. Now, of course, let me back up. You could get its position, check it against the target position, which is 2.7, and every frame look to see is its current position equal to its target position, and if not, you could advance it by 0.1 or 0.2. And so you're just basically stepping it forward manually. That's a lot of work, and it's a lot of goofy setup here of stuff to check. So why do that if we can get something else to do it for us, right? And that is the point of Playmaker. So let's look at another possibility here. Look under our actions, and I use a move towards down here in the transform. Let's add that and see what it gives us. First of all, we can leave the game object to move as the owner. That's good. The target object we can choose as the cylinder, and that will just take the position of the cylinder and have it move the cube to it, which is pretty good. And let's see what happens when we do that much. And see, it moves right to it. A little fast. Let's see if we can slow it down and see what it looks like. If you look at the max speed, let's cut that in half. See if that helps. So now we're getting a much slower animation. Let's go even slower still. Cut that in half again to 2.5 and play, watch our cube, and it sure moves there, but it's pretty lame. It's just moving in this linear motion, right? It doesn't do anything else. You'd kind of want it to surge forward and then ease out. It's not giving us any of that. So not a real good possibility there too, unless that's what you're looking for is linear stuff. Maybe if you're making a factory scene, that might be pretty good. But let's go ahead and get rid of that. And let's take a look at what iTween can give us, because now we've seen all our other options. If you look under the iTween menu, we've got a lot of options for moving. And what I want to choose is Move To. Add that. And right away, if you look at it in the stack, look at how many options we have already. There's all these things we can do. We can set up the basic behavior here of how the move actually works. Down at this look at section, we can choose whether or not the object is going to, like if it's following an object or if it's moving from another angle, will it point towards it? Will it reorient itself? For instance, if this object were moving here, then the cube could do a look at, which is move to orient itself. So you get a turret or kind of security camera sort of behavior there. So you can choose that if you'd like. You get some movement along a path, how it's going to behave when it does that, and you can fire off events at the end. So there is a tremendous amount of stuff we can do here. Let's take a look at the basic movement to start out. We're going to go ahead and move to the owner as the game object. The transform position can be the cylinder, meaning that's what we want to move towards. And let's set our time to 2. And let's take a look at that. So right away, moved right to it. Got a little hitch there at the beginning, but that's okay. Take a look at that in a second. Now, what I want to do is make sure that we've got an ease in out, because right now it's doing that same linear thing that we saw before. And as you see here, there's a really large amount of ease in out that we can choose. I'm going to start out with an ease in out quad. Let's play that again and take a look. And now the cube has, it has a little bit of a surge at the beginning and the end with a bit more slowness in the middle. We can make that effect even more pronounced if we choose a different one. Let's say ease in out quart. Try that again. And see, now you get a very pronounced motion. So that gives you that nice ease in out, which starts to make your motions look a lot more professional and really brings a lot of life to what you're doing. We don't need it to look at or use a path. And that gets rid of that little hitch. Because when we started out, the object was pitching itself up to look at the position of the cylinder. So you can choose, you'll want to turn some of this on or off depending on more of the complex motions you want to get. We also have some loop options, which are really interesting. Right now it's set to none. If you choose loop and play, it's going to play the little motion you set up, snap back, and repeat it. And it'll do that over and over until you specifically tell it to stop. Another interesting option is to set it to ping pong. And if you play that one, it'll go backwards and forwards in your motion. And this gives you some interesting stuff, like the you have a swinging object you want to go back and forth. You could have mechanical objects that go back and forth, pendulum type motions, or your slicer dicer kind of blades and platformers. This could be a door that's moving open and closed for different timing things. Basically, anytime you put timing elements into games, you start to want to use something like this a lot of the time. And finally, very interestingly, the events at the end. We can fire a finish event. So let's make a new event here. I'll call this one shake. And a new state, also called shake. Add a transition, shake. And here in mover, I'm going to choose the finish event as shake. So when it's done doing its motion, it'll play this event for us. And I need to set the ping pong off or else it'll never stop, right? Because ping ponging and looping means it doesn't end. So it does need to play once and end here. Got our finished state of shake. And then in shake, I'm going to come to the action browser, go back to iTween, and I'm going to choose iTween shake position. Add that. And this lets us add a little bit of just, kind of shimmy to the thing like that. But Can you imagine trying to hand animate all these little tiny minute things and it would look the same every time? You don't get any randomness. This gives you an option to really quickly choose how much shake you want. I'm going to just put zero point 0.2 in here. It'll be noticeable. This is probably more than we'd want if we wanted to be subtle. Choose 2 for time. So this will be a nice big shake over a nice amount of time so we can really see what's going on. And let's play this. And there's our shake. So we get motions that lead to each other. And this is really important because notice it doesn't start the shake until it's done with its motion. And this lets you do things like, the patrol kind of idea. Like you want the machine to move to this particular spot, and then maybe it's going to look around. If it's a robot, it's going to stop and look around, and then it'll do another motion. You can keep chaining these things together. You can have chunks of these little behaviors that you can randomly call too. There's so much you can achieve when you start setting up simple little combinations that you use something like a manager, like we've looked at, to do much more complex combinations of them. So there's a lot to take advantage of right there. So as a wrap up, once again, I just want to stress, if you look in the iTween menu, there are over 20, I think there's 25, 27 items in here to use. Really cool stuff. And if you click on each one, just like any other object in iTween, it's going to tell you what they do. So it's really worth spending some time to look at. There is a wealth of opportunity here for the things you can do. iTween and Playmaker will let you create really professional looking motion, even if you don't know how to animate, even if you don't know how to code, more complex things like ease in and ease out motions. It lets you do motions for all kinds of complex objects like machines, even characters. If you've got a character with its legs animated, you can move it around this way if you'd like. You can set up some really great game cameras, all kinds of uses for that. And finally, maybe most importantly, you can have complete programmatic control over all your motions during the game, which is really neat because then all the motion in the game can respond to the player input. That is really super cool. So that's iTween integrated into Playmaker.